Welcome to the Unraveling Shaltazar podcast. Hello, Jeffrey. How are you today?
I am okay, Mark. I was saying just before we started to record, I think I have the New Moon Blues.
The New Moon Blues.
The New Moon Blues, yeah, just sort of... and it's interesting because I know the message that you've chosen for us to talk about, and I'm trying to look at my New Moon Blues with a little bit of a different attitude today because it's just part of life. And in the past, when I felt this way, I would kind of struggle to get through it, it feels uncomfortable. And even as I'm starting to talk, it's like, oh, the words aren't coming. This is uncomfortable. And so I'm trying to just be okay with my New Moon Blues.
Nice. Sounds maybe you should write a song. That sounds kind of like a classic or a good title for a classic blues tune.
You read my mind. You actually synced in because that's what I was thinking. But the thought after that is you don't know how to sing, Jeffrey. So that would be a useless experience. So I'll leave. You're the creative one. So if you wanna create that song for me, that would be great. But,
okay.
Yeah. So let's see what our conversation brings today as I set my intention to be okay with however it is I'm feeling.
Okay. Well, the message I chose to talk about today is it's called Two Sides of the Same Coin. Again, I'm not sure how old it is. It might be an older one. I can see 2015. So yeah, it goes back to October 2015. So it is a bit of an older one. But again, like all Shaltazar messages, it's got a kind of a common theme to it. A number of the messages talk about the duality, polarity, and oneness, and this kind of is a really good, I thought, kind of a condensation of all those different subjects. The gist of it, I guess, is how we as humans are only kind of experiencing half of life or half of reality at a time. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, and how sometimes we resist the half we're in, and we seem to be always looking for the other half. Mm-hmm. It's interesting you mentioned it definitely is an older message. When I was telling my wife that's the message we're going to be discussing, it's one of the few that I remember exactly where I was when I channeled it, and we were away in California. Lois was taking a Doreen Virtue Angel Practitioner course, and we were somewhere, I think in Irvine, and I had some time on my own. And I remember that one because the analogy of the coin really stuck out in my mind, and we'll talk a bit more about that. But I really remember the actual circumstances of channeling that message, and so that's kind of interesting. I think what Shaltazar is trying to tell us is that that we live in the polarity, we live in the duality, and our resistance of that duality is what causes much of our suffering. Mm-hmm. You and I are big fans of the Kabbalion, the philosophy of Hermes Trismegistus. And this, as I was re-listening to this message this morning, it reminded me of that principle of polarity and how everything on planet Earth is the duality. And I love their explanation where they said that all things are the same, they just differ in a matter of degrees. And they talked about hot and cold, and when does cold become hot and when does hot become cold. And so although we are looking at things in life from the total opposite, what Shaltazar is pointing out is that that's just because the energy has been slowed down and they feel so opposite. Mm-hmm. And so our lower and slower feelings are just an extension of our higher and faster feelings. They're just the slowed down version of it, right? And I remember, I remember thinking, Lois and I go for walks all the time, and we'll go, when the weather's getting a little bit cool, and we're bundled up, and you see people walking around in short sleeve shirt and shorts, and it's like, we think it's cold and they think it's warm. So which is it? And so I really think that this message was trying to tell us that our accentuating of the opposites, of the duality, is what causes a lot of our suffering. And they're really encouraging us to look at life as a whole, so that my new moon blues could just be an extension of a day that I'm just feeling in the flow and everything is really humming along and I feel so excited and so positive. So what's the difference between those? It's part of my life. It is part of who I am, to experience the lower and slower and the higher and faster.
Yeah. I've often wondered, if you were to, I guess, quantify or add up in a lifetime all the moments where you experienced joy and all the moments where you experienced the opposite of joy, sadness or whatever else you want to put on that side of the equation, if they would be equal, because it seems like everything is always moving towards some sort of a balance, and you have these moments of great happiness and joy and elation, and then you've got these moments of despair and dejection, and for whatever reason. And I don't know if this is true for everybody. It seems like it's easier to remember the negative experiences than it is the positive ones. The positive ones are like, oh yeah, that was nice. Yeah, we had a great time. But remember when this happened, and then this terrible thing happened, and this and so I kind of want to hope, I guess, that this polarity idea, that it is in the span of a lifetime a balanced and even experience, I suppose.
That's good, but I think what you just said really helps us understand the deeper meaning of this message. And what Shaltazar is saying is, why do we have to look at the balancing? Why do we have to look at this side of the coin and that kind of side of the coin and make sure that they're fairly equal? What if your whole life was what had meaning and not the parts of it? And so even your desire to measure the joy and the opposite of the joy is that resistance that most human beings have, because we think it's one side of the coin or the other, right? And so, at what point, does your joy become disappointment?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know.
It's kind of interesting, eh? And yet the logical mind wants to put them in the camps, and it's kind of interesting. We've got 3 kids, and we're at that stage. Our kids are all, I shouldn't call them kids, they're adults, and 2 of them have kids of their own. And as parents, we grapple with that. Do we treat them equally, or do we treat them fairly? And what does fairly mean? Because we've got a girl and 2 boys, and they're all very different. And when we give things, do you give, if you give this one $1, do you give this one $1? Well, maybe you felt really like you wanted to give this one $1 and that one not today. But then my wife will say, well, if you give this one something, you got to give that one something. Well, maybe sometime in their life they're going to need it more. Why do you want to give it to them now? So you get into this whole, equal versus fair versus balance. And I think the essence of this message that Shaltazar is encouraging us, and it's kind of interesting how they use the analogy of the coin. The value of the coin is not on one side or the other. The value of your life is not going to be measured by the moments of joy or the moments of the opposite of joy. I believe when our life experience is over and we move up for the life review, that the great creator is not going to say, okay, Mark, did you have enough moments of joy? Let's go back and relook that, Here's a few moments of despair that you could have had joy, but you made the wrong choice. I really think the life review is going to be the holistic approach. The what did you bring to consciousness when you were in joy, and what did you bring to consciousness when you're in despair? And you and I were talking before we started this recording, you're going through a period of time where you're kind of busy and you're kind of overwhelmed and you got a sense of responsibility. Well, that's as important a piece of your whole coin. That side of the coin is as important as next year when you don't feel as responsible, when you don't feel as overwhelmed. So the question I think that this one raises is, are you looking at your life as the whole coin, or are you looking at the individual pieces? Are you looking at judging? And I think that was a big one, and that's what I'm trying to do today in my New Moon Blues, is not judge. Because if I judged, I would call this a bad day. I would call this the flip side of the coin, right? But it's kind of interesting. I meditated more today than I have normally. I kind of just fluttered through the day and didn't push myself to do things. I'm very fortunate that I have that opportunity. I'm trying not to look at it as a bad day, but just as part of my life, the whole of my life. And I really think that whole coin analogy, and maybe that's why I remember that message so distinctly, because it was like, wow, this coin thing, what is the two sides of the same coin, right? I mean, in the message they say that whatever people call the sides of the coin, and in my mind I was thinking heads and tails, right? That's, growing up we talked about heads and tails, right? And so the top and the bottom, the heads and the tails, we look at, right? We play the game of flip the coin, right? And so we really focus on the sides of the coin, but not the coin itself. And what Shaltazar is saying is that your whole life, the whole coin, is the value. Don't forget, when we do our life review, we're going, I believe, in front of an energy that does not judge us, that does not say, Mark, you didn't bring enough moments of joy.
Right.
It's like, you didn't handle that one well enough, Mark. There should have been more joy there, right?
Yeah.
It's like, it's kind of interesting, eh?
Yeah. That part of the message was one that I had to go over, and then I printed it and read it a couple times too, because it was speaking to me, and I was having a hard time, resonating with it. But where it says, did you ever notice that nowhere on your planet is there a coin that's the same on both sides, right? And so there's always, like you said, a head or a tail. But I think the point that they were making is that, the head side isn't worth more than the tail side. It's the coin itself that has the value. And that's kind of what you're saying about, looking at your life as a whole, not as the, as the individual parts of it. It's an entire holistic
package.
Yeah,
it is. Right. And so when we're going through the underside of the coin, we think that it's the worst thing ever, and yet, and in other messages from Shaltazar, they tell us that darkness is our greatest teacher. I mean, we know that we have learned so much from the underside of the coin, right? And the birds are chirping in the background, I hear, and I think they're agreeing with us. Yeah, I think they're agreeing with it. You got to love Mother Nature. You got to love Mother Nature. And I love in the message where they say that if you're a coin collector and you have this rare coin, but there are two of them, one where both sides are totally intact and the other where one side of the coin is worn off, the coin collector would value the coin that both sides are intact, where you can see it, and devalue the coin where one side is faded, right? Because obviously if it's an ancient coin or it was a coin that was whatever, that the fact that both sides are vibrant and you can see them clearly makes that coin more valuable. And if you sort of look at that, they're saying if you devalue your pain, if you devalue your suffering, if you devalue the difficult times in your life, if you devalue the learning and growth, you're devaluing your whole life.
Yeah.
Your life is not worth as much because you've avoided that part. And you know me, I'm a big proponent. I believe that we are here to give God what it does not have. It comes from unity, and the fact that we live in the polarity is something that is foreign to the unity of God. And so living fully in the duality, living from the whole coin, from both sides, right? And, you know, not necessarily in this message, but Shaltazar makes it quite clear, you know, the uncomfortable side of the coin is uncomfortable. You know, it's like you say, we remember the negative parts, but we don't really remember the positive. I mean, the positive ones don't come to mind because they're just so pleasant. And so why are we dwelling on the unpleasant? Why are we dwelling on the uncomfortable? It's just as important a part of life as the comfortable.
Yeah, well, and in the message, they talk about, you know, actually like pushing away the unpleasant. It says, well, a couple of things. Have you noticed that you often experience the side of the duality you find most uncomfortable and displeasing? Did you ever imagine that was part of the plan? You know, you choose to see one side of the polarity as good and one as bad. You judge them and put in so much effort to escape the bad and find the good, and you go through lifetime after lifetime seeking and searching to find the polarity that you believe to be good and desirable. So, you know, it's like, yeah, okay, we recognize this dark side of the coin, but we're always trying to flip it over to the other side, you know, and pretend the dark side doesn't exist. So,
right,
or reject it.
And I think that is, you know, a lot of Buddhist teachings say that you sort of have to neutralize it all, but to me, that doesn't make as much sense, because I do want the joy, I do want the bliss, I do want the contentment, I do want the freedom, but I'm also mature enough to realize that with it comes all of the flip side of that other coin, right? Because to be honest, and you and I have talked about it before, we are programmed to desire, we are programmed to want, and so if we lived on the positive side of the coin, I think we'd get bored.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, but I have found myself in my life when things are really going well, that I self-sabotage, that I stir things up, that I create a little bit of drama so that I can experience the underbelly of the coin. And then when it comes, I bitch and complain and figure out how I can get back to what it is I gave up.
Right. Yeah. Isn't it just human beings, right? We're never satisfied, you know.
Right.
It's as soon as you get everything that you want, you either want something different or you want something more, It's a perfect. I mean, a perfect example of exactly what this is saying. You know that you know.
Right.
You know,
and that's the design. That's the design of human life. And so I think what they're trying to say is give yourself a break and stop fighting it.
Yeah. I
think you're absolutely right. What you described is, you know, it's like, you know, aren't we interesting creatures, right? That we will always be creating, you know, something else. And all Shaltazar is saying is, yeah, that's the design. So why not mitigate the suffering by just accepting that?
Yeah. Good advice. Yeah, it's a good message. It's it's certainly thought provoking. And you know, I mean, I guess the ones that are the most confusing are the ones that hit closest to home. So you know, it was one that kind of intrigued me and perplexed me a bit. So that's why I found it so fascinating, I guess.
Well, and it was kind of interesting because I know it was on your list, and I think we've, over the last couple of weeks, something has come up and we haven't discussed it. And it's very appropriate that we're discussing it today when I'm having my new moon blues, and I get a chance to experience the side of the coin that I would rather not when I'm doing one of these episodes with you, right? It's like, gee, I'd rather be on my game. And the universe says, no, that's the purpose of this message. Show up, do the best you can. It's like Don Miguel Ruiz's fourth agreement. Always do your best, and your best will change depending on the energy, depending on the circumstances. And so I think this was a perfect day for us to discuss accepting the duality of life, accepting the totality of life, and quit trying to squirm out of the parts you don't like.
There you go. There you go. Embrace it all. It's all good, right?
There it is. Love it. Thanks for choosing that message, Mark. I appreciate it. Appreciate you doing these episodes with me. This is episode 23, and so it's hard to believe that we've been doing this for as long as we have, and I hope we will continue to do it. Thank you so much, and may you enjoy your whole coin of life.
Exactly. Thank you. Thank you, Jeffrey.
Take care. Love and light to everyone.
If you have any questions about the Master Teachings of Shaltazar, we invite you to submit them to Jeffrey at jeffreyeisen.com, and we will make your question the topic of a future episode.